First Snow by Mary Oliver. The snow began here. This morning and all day continued its white rhetoric everywhere, calling us back to why, how, whence such beauty, and what the meaning. Such an oracle fever! Flowing past windows, an energy it seemed would never ebb, never settle less than lovely. And only now, deep into the night, it has finally ended. The silence is immense, and the heavens still hold a million candles. Nowhere the familiar things, stars, the moon, the darkness we expect and nightly turn from. Trees glitter like castles of ribbons. The broad fields smolder with light. A passing creek bed lies heaped with shining hills. And though the questions that have assailed us all day remain, not a single answer has been found. Walking out now into the silence and the light, under the trees and through the fields, feels like one. The speaker is the author. The author has a strong connection to nature. She can be considered one with nature. The speaker also marvels at the beauty of nature. The tone of the poem is warm-hearted. The beginning is playful, lines 5 through 9, quote, rhetoric everywhere, calling us back to why, how, whence, such beauty and what the meaning, such an oracle fever, end quote. The beginning is also mystified, lines 4 through 7, quote, continued its white rhetoric everywhere, calling us back to why, how, whence such beauty and what the meaning, end quote. The middle is mocking, lines 18 through 22, quote, nowhere the familiar things, stars, the moon, the darkness we expect and nightly turn from, end quote. The ending is fascinated, shown in lines 23 through 27, quote, trees glitter like castles of ribbon, the broad fields smolder with light, a passing creek bed lies heaped with shining hills, end quote. And in lines 32 through 36, quote, walking out now into the silence and the light, under the trees and through the fields, feels like one, end quote. The log line in the poem is that it snowed all day and the trees, fields, and hills are covered. There is no conflict in this poem. Oliver uses many different key figurative language in her poem. She uses a metaphor in line 18, quote, a million candles, end quote. Lines 24 through 25, quote, the broad fields smolder with light, end quote, and 27, quote, heaped with shining hills, end quote. She also uses a simile in lines 22 through 24, quote, trees glitter like castles of ribbons, end quote. She uses visual and kinesthetic imagery in lines 9 through 10. Flowing past windows, an energy it seemed, end quote. She uses auditory imagery in lines 15 through 16, quote, the silence is immense, end quote. Oliver also uses visual imagery in line 17, quote, heaven still holds a million candles, end quote, and 22 through 27, quote, trees glitter like castles of ribbons, the broad fields smolder with light, a passing creek bed lies, heaped with shining hills. She uses kinesthetic, visual, and auditory imagery in lines 32 through 35. Walking out now into the silence and the light, under the trees and through the fields, end quote. Organic imagery is used in line 36. Quote, feels like one, end quote. Personification is used in lines 1 through 9. Quote, the snow began here, this morning and all day, continued its white rhetoric everywhere, calling us back to why, how, whence such beauty and what the meaning, such an oracle fever, end quote. The snow began here, this morning and all day. continued its white rhetoric everywhere, calling us back to why, how. Oliver writes using open form. The language is contemporary. There is sentence variety in length, and there's no stanzas throughout the poem. There is also no rhyme scheme. The type of poem is verse libre. Oliver also uses many different sound devices throughout her poem. She uses alliteration in line 9, quote, fever flowing, end quote. 16, quote, is immense, end quote. 35 through 36, quote, fields, end quote. 29, quote, assailed us all, end quote. And 35, quote, through the, end quote. She also uses euphony in line 12 for the word lovely, in line 9 for the word oracular, and for the word castles in line 23. Cacophony is used in line 29 for the word assailed. Consonance is used in line 15 and 16, quote, silence, immense, end quote. Assonance is used in line 12, quote, lovely only, end quote. With the tone being so warm-hearted, mystified, and playful, the overall theme of the poem is the beauty and majesty of nature. Basically, nature is beautiful and there's nothing like it. I think the poem is very effective. It uses different types of imagery to not only paint a picture in your mind, but to also get you to feel physically and emotionally how gorgeous nature really is. You can see the snow falling, you can see the trees glittering, you can see the million candles, which are stars. I think it's very effective in having the reader grasp just how beautiful nature is. I think it uses a lot of words that normally wouldn't describe nature.